Okay, you guys, so buckle up, because what I am about to tell you is going to make every hip-hop beef of the last 2 decades look like a schoolyard argument. Forget the diss tracks. Forget the Instagram trolling. Forget the lawnmower jokes. Yesterday afternoon, inside a locked luxury VIP lounge at Miami International Airport, Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent, and William Leonard Roberts II, the man we have been calling Rick Ross for almost 20 years, physically put their hands on each other. I am not talking about a shove. I am talking about tables flipped, cognac glasses shattered, bodyguards choke slamming each other into champagne displays, and Miami-Dade police officers busting through soundproof glass doors with weapons already drawn. But that is not even the part that has the whole internet on fire tonight. Because when it was said and done, a black leather bag hit the floor, the zipper burst open, and a red-stamped federal document slid across that hardwood in front of half a dozen witnesses. And what that document actually says, y'all, might be the single most dangerous piece of paper in hip-hop history. Stay with me, because I am walking you through every second of what really happened behind those frosted glass doors, and the reason one of these two men had to be escorted out of that airport under armed federal guard. Before we jump into what happened yesterday, we have to rewind, because you cannot understand the size of this explosion without understanding the size of the fuse. This beef between 50 Cent and Rick Ross is not new. It is almost 18 years deep. It started back in 2008 at the BET Hip Hop Awards, when 50 Cent, sitting on top of the entire rap game, allegedly locked eyes with Rick Ross backstage and gave him a look. Just a look. One cold, dismissive glance. But for a man like Ross, who had spent years building this untouchable kingpin image, that one look was the ultimate insult. Ross fired back with a diss track called Mafia Music in early 2009, and honey, that is when Curtis went to work. 50 Cent did not just record a response. 50 Cent went to the Florida Department of Corrections, pulled up official state paperwork, and revealed that the self-proclaimed drug lord Rick Ross had actually worked as a correctional officer in a Florida prison. That is where the nickname Officer Ricky was born. In any other era, that reveal would have been the end of the career. Full stop. But Rick Ross did something almost nobody in this industry has ever pulled off. He refused to lay down and die. Ross doubled down on the luxury. He built Maybach Music Group into a real powerhouse. He signed Meek Mill. He signed Whale. He put out platinum records. He bought a 109-room mega mansion in Georgia and named it the Promised Land. For over a decade, Ross used opulence as armor. He was going to be richer, louder, and grander than the man who exposed him. Except 50 Cent never forgot. Not for a single day. Because Curtis is a long game player. He kept the receipts. There were physical brawls between their camps at award shows, most notably the 2012 BET Hip Hop Awards backstage altercation, where G-Unit reportedly went after Ross's associate gunplay. There was the devastating 2015 court case where 50 Cent was ordered to pay $5 million to the mother of Ross's child over a leaked private video. And everybody remembers Curtis filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 days later. Ross clowned him about that for years. But here is the thing about Curtis Jackson. You can drag him through a courtroom, you can put him on every gossip blog on earth, and that man is going to rebuild bigger. He conquered television with the Power franchise. He locked in a Las Vegas residency. He opened a full-scale film production studio in Shreveport, Louisiana. By the summer of 2026, the power dynamic had flipped again. Now it was Rick Ross catching the smoke. 50 Cent launched a relentless digital campaign to chip away at Ross's billionaire image piece by piece. First, he clowned Ross's spot on the Millennium Tour, pointing out Ross was not the headliner, just a listed special guest, and 50 said out loud what people were whispering, that Rick Ross by himself could no longer sell out an arena. Then came the viral lawnmower moment. Ross posted a video of himself cutting his own grass on his massive estate, and 50 Cent immediately jumped on it, publicly asking why a supposed billionaire mogul was mowing his own lawn instead of paying a professional crew. And then, y'all, came the moment that broke something in Rick Ross for real. When photos surfaced of Ross standing in a boarding line waiting to get on a commercial flight, 50 Cent went nuclear. He allegedly sent Rick Ross $40,000. Not as a peace offering, as a public joke. As a way of implying that the biggest boss in hip-hop could not afford to keep his $35 million Gulfstream G550 in the sky. That is the humiliation Ross was carrying when he walked into Miami International Airport yesterday. Because listen, everybody in the industry knew this was coming. Ross's pride was being publicly filleted, one viral clip at a time. Everybody knew that if these two men ever ended up in the same physical room without a stage or a manager between them, something ugly was going to happen. Nobody predicted it would happen in the one place in Miami specifically designed to guarantee absolute peace and quiet. The date is July 16, 2026. The location is the Signature Flight Support VIP Lounge at Miami International Airport. This is not a regular waiting area. This is a fortress. Soundproof glass, custom leather booths, private butlers, quiet cognac, hyper-vigilant private security that only serves foreign diplomats, billionaires, and A-list celebrities. According to a highly placed airport employee who witnessed the entire incident, Rick Ross walked through those frosted glass doors at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. Ross was scheduled to fly out to Colombia on his newly upgraded custom private jet, which he had been calling Maybach Air, allegedly retrofitted with a $500,000 Starlink Wi-Fi setup. Ross rolled in with 3 massive personal bodyguards trailing behind him. Yellow tracksuit, platinum chains, multi-carat diamond rings. He walked in like a man who owned Miami, and the temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. Because tucked away in a secluded leather booth at the far end of the lounge, quietly sipping a glass of top-shelf cognac, was Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, in the flesh. Also flying private, also passing through Miami, also alone with only 2 of his own security guys sitting a few feet away. For about 10 full seconds, that lounge went dead silent. The bartender put down the shaker. The clinking of crystal just stopped. In that kind of space, celebrities are trained to do passive avoidance. You look at your phone. You whisper to your manager. You request a different private suite. You never, ever escalate. But Rick Ross was not in a passive mood yesterday. Rick Ross was carrying 18 years of Officer Ricky trolling and a fresh $40,000 humiliation check. Ross locked eyes with Curtis Jackson, took a long breath, and walked directly across that lounge toward 50's booth, 3 bodyguards forming a wall of muscle behind him. 50 Cent's security stood up immediately. Their hands went inside their jackets. And this is the part one want you to sit with, because it tells you something about Curtis. 50 Cent, according to the witness, calmly raised one hand and told his own guys to sit back down. He was not scared. Witnesses say Curtis had a small, cold, mocking smirk on his face the whole time. Ross stopped exactly 3 feet from 50's table. He leaned down. He placed both of his heavily iced-out hands flat on that mahogany wood. And then, according to a nearby staff member whose microphone was allegedly still open on a call, Ross whispered a single question. He said, "You got a whole lot to say on the internet, Curtis. Why don't you say it to my face while we are standing on my turf?" Curtis did not blink. Curtis leaned back in his booth. Curtis took another sip of that cognac. Curtis looked up at the biggest boss and said, "I would say it to your face, Ricky, but I did not think you could afford the entry fee for this lounge. Did you have to use that 40 grand I sent you just to get past the gate?" Y'all, that was the last civilized sentence spoken in that room. Because the moment those words hit the air, Rick Ross exploded. Ross slammed his fist down on that table so hard the crystal cognac glass shattered. Ross lunged forward, grabbed Curtis Jackson by the collar of his jacket, and physically dragged him up and out of that leather booth. 50 Cent, who let me remind you has taken 9 bullets and lived to talk about it, reacted on pure street instinct. Curtis broke Ross's grip, drove his shoulder into Ross's chest, and shoved the 300-pound mobile backwards into a marble partition. Witnesses say the impact echoed through the high ceiling like a gunshot. Tables flipped. Chairs went flying. Both entourages collided at once. Ross's lead bodyguard, a 6'4" wall of a man, charged forward and tried to tackle 50 Cent, and 50's security intercepted him mid-air, sending both crashing into a display of premium champagne bottles. Glass exploded across the walls. Now here is where I have to slow down, because this is the part of the story that changes everything. In the middle of that brawl, while Ross was screaming and Curtis was throwing short jabs to keep the bigger man off him, a heavy black leather designer bag that belonged to Rick Ross got knocked off a bar stool. That bag hit the polished floor. The zipper burst open, and the contents spilled out. And in that instant, the fighting just stopped. Everybody froze. Because sitting there on the ground, on top of a stack of what looked like financial ledgers, was a bright red stamped federal document with the words Doge Active Investigation and Cooperation Agreement printed right across the top. In hip-hop, there is no accusation more dangerous, no label more permanently radioactive than the word informant. 50 Cent knew exactly what he was looking at. The mocking smirk disappeared instantly. Curtis took a slow step back. He looked at the document. He looked up at Rick Ross. And Ross, according to two separate witnesses, went ash gray under the fluorescent lights of that lounge. Before Ross's security could even react, one of Curtis Jackson's associates yanked out a personal phone and started snapping high-resolution photos of the paperwork on the ground. Rapid fire. Click, click, click. That is when Rick Ross lost whatever was left of his mind. Ross screamed at his security to grab that phone, and the physical fight reignited with twice the intensity. But now it was not about hurt feelings or Officer Ricky. It was a life or death struggle for physical evidence. Ross's bodyguards lunged at 50's associate and dragged him to the ground in a choke hold. 50 Cent physically threw himself into the pile to protect that phone. And Ross, according to the witness, was screaming at the top of his lungs, delete that right now. You are not leaving this airport alive. That is a direct quote, allegedly captured on an open microphone. Within 90 seconds, outer airport security breached the double-locked doors. 5 armed Miami-Dade police officers, 3 K-9 units, weapons drawn, flooded that room. And only then did the violence finally grind to a halt. Both men were separated. Their clothes were torn, their chains disheveled. And that luxury lounge, y'all, that palace of quiet money, was left looking like a war zone. Shattered crystal on the floor, cognac and champagne soaked into the carpet, overturned mahogany tables. Because of the extreme wealth and celebrity status of both men, no immediate arrests were made, but the officers made it clear a full investigation was being opened. Curtis Jackson and his team were escorted out under heavy armed guard, straight onto the tarmac, to prevent a second collision. Rick Ross was detained in a private holding room for over an hour of questioning about the altercation and the property damage. But the real damage had already been done, because within 30 minutes of 50 Cent leaving that airport, blurred and partially redacted images of that red-stamped federal document started circulating in private Discord servers and underground hip-hop Telegram channels. And the caption on the very first leak was 6 words long. MMG boss caught with federal paperwork at MIA. Officer Ricky is back on duty. And the internet did not react. The internet detonated. By 5 o'clock, a prominent hip-hop media outlet was reporting they had received a second leak from a source close to 50 Cent's camp, claiming the cooperation agreement in Ross's bag was tied directly to an ongoing federal investigation into high-tier money laundering and international distribution networks running from Colombia into Miami. If that source is telling the truth, then Rick Ross is not just a former correctional officer. It would imply that Ross has been actively cooperating with federal authorities to shield his $150 million empire from a looming indictment. And in one afternoon, the whole narrative flipped. Because for 18 years, the biggest boss has been calling everybody around him a snitch. And now the biggest boss might be sitting on the biggest cooperation deal in the industry. The questions started stacking on top of each other in real time. Was the Starlink jet upgrade actually a cover for frequent international travel tied to a federal deal? Was the Georgia mega mansion being protected by some kind of federal intervention? Why Colombia? Why now? Now here is where the story takes its first hard turn, and this is the part a lot of the big blogs are missing. Late last night, at 11:45 p.m. Eastern Time, a high-powered corporate law firm representing Rick Ross put out an emergency press release. You would think Ross's lawyers would come out swinging and call the whole thing a fake. You would think they would say the document was AI-generated, or photoshopped, or planted. They did not. Read this carefully, because the language matters. The statement said that while the client denies initiating any physical altercation at Miami International Airport, the documents currently circulating online are part of an ongoing, highly sensitive corporate litigation file involving intellectual property rights and asset tracking, and any further distribution of these materials will be met with immediate federal prosecution. Read that back. They did not say the paperwork was fake. They did not say the images were doctored. They explicitly called the document confidential legal paperwork, and they threatened federal prosecution against anybody who shared it. In one paragraph, Rick Ross's own legal team confirmed that whatever fell out of that bag was 100% real. And then, y'all, right when I thought this story could not get any wilder, it got wilder. A retired federal court clerk with over 20 years of experience managing docket files in Florida spent the entire night zooming in on the high-resolution photos snapped by 50 Cent's associate. And this morning, on a well-respected legal blog, he published a breakdown of the serial numbers on that document. The serial number does not belong to an investigation into Rick Ross. The serial number is registered to a multi-million-dollar federal asset forfeiture case from 2015. The exact same year, y'all, that Curtis Jackson filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. If that clerk's analysis is correct, and multiple legal analysts online are saying it looks credible, then the paperwork inside Rick Ross's bag was not Rick Ross's cooperation agreement. It was a sealed federal file containing the financial disclosures, hidden assets, and secret bank accounts of Curtis Jackson himself. Paperwork Ross's legal team must have quietly acquired during their long and vicious courtroom battles. Let that land. Rick Ross was not the one working with the feds. Rick Ross was allegedly carrying a nuclear stockpile of 50 Cent's most protected financial secrets. Documents that, if they ever go public, could dismantle the entire Power franchise deal structure, threaten the Shreveport studio ownership, and blow apart the image of Curtis Jackson as a self-made independent billionaire. And now, everything about yesterday makes sense in a completely different way. That is why the smirk vanished off of 50 Cent's face the second the bag hit the floor. That is why his associate risked getting choked out to snap those photos. That is why the fight turned into a life or death struggle for control of a phone. Because in that moment, both men suddenly understood that whoever ended the night holding those files was going to hold leverage over the other one for the rest of their career. This is no longer a beef about lawnmowers and commercial flights. This is corporate espionage. This is mutual assured destruction. This is two billionaires with the ability to end each other in a single press release. Now the bigger question, the one that has the whole industry on edge tonight, is simple. What does Curtis Jackson do next? Because he has the photos. He has the serial numbers. He has proof Rick Ross was traveling with sealed federal paperwork tied to him. And Curtis, as we have watched for almost 20 years, is not a man who forgets. He is a man who waits. He files the receipt in a drawer and pulls it out 5 years later, on a Wednesday, when you least expect it. On the other side, Rick Ross is sitting in Miami with an emergency legal team, a threatened federal prosecution warning, and the entire hip-hop industry publicly wondering whether he is about to become the most famous federal witness in music history, or the most exposed corporate spy in the culture. Neither ends well, and I want to talk about the industry reaction, because it has been colder than anything I have seen in a long time. Within 4 hours of the leak, a very prominent Memphis rapper featured on multiple classic Ross tracks reportedly unfollowed Rick Ross on every single social media platform. No statement, no explanation. Just gone. Multiple artists long in the Maybach music orbit have reportedly started scrubbing tagged photos and old collaboration posts. DJ Academics went live to over 300,000 concurrent viewers, held the leaked images up on his stream, and said, if these documents get verified by a federal court reporter, the M&G brand is finished. You cannot rap about kilos and bulletproof trucks when you are carrying a cooperation agreement in your gym bag. Even Boozy, who normally stays neutral, went on his own platform and, without naming Ross directly, said the game is backwards, standing in VIP lounges pretending to be a boss but carrying government paper. Real wealth does not need a federal shield. Every hip-hop head watching knew exactly who he was talking about. The financial fallout has already started. Reports are circulating tonight that several major investors tied to Ross's southern fast food franchise locations have called for emergency meetings to discuss brand exposure. Ross's team is reportedly scrambling to reassure podcast hosts, event promoters, and streaming partners his upcoming album rollout is not in jeopardy. But if you know anything about the hip-hop economy, you know how fast the temperature drops once the word federal starts floating around your name. Once that ink hits a red stamp, the streets do not ask follow-up questions. And that is the corner Rick Ross is in tonight. Now on the other side of the internet, Ross's loyal fan base is not going down without a fight. His camp launched a massive defensive push online, arguing the whole leak is a paid smear campaign engineered by 50 Cent to disrupt Ross's upcoming album cycle. One viral post that has already racked up over 50,000 likes said, "You'll really think a billionaire boss like Rosie is carrying physical federal documents in a gym bag?" And listen, I hear that argument. It is the kind of argument that would work on any other day. But there is one thing Ross's defenders have to answer for, and it is the same thing his own lawyers walked right into. If the document was fake, why did his legal team threaten federal prosecution against anybody who shared it? You do not threaten federal prosecution over paperwork that does not exist. You do not invoke the Southern District of Florida over a Photoshop job. That is the crack Ross's camp cannot seal shut. And so tonight, we are sitting in a moment hip-hop has honestly never seen before. Because most beefs end with a diss track. Most beefs end with a Verzuz battle. Most beefs end with a handshake at an award show 3 years later, when everybody involved has a new album to promote. This one, if the analysis holds up, ends with two billionaires holding each other's federal paperwork like nuclear codes, both aware that whoever leaks first loses first. In that kind of standoff, silence is louder than any diss track. This is why the industry has gone quiet tonight. This is why the artists who normally live on Twitter are nowhere to be found. Everybody in the room can feel the next 48 hours are going to determine how the next decade of hip-hop plays out. Think about it. Curtis Jackson has spent almost 20 years chipping away at Rick Ross piece by piece. The Officer Ricky reveal, the bankruptcy court clown session, the lawnmower memes, the $40,000 humiliation, the Millennium Tour disrespect. And every single time, Ross has managed to survive. Every single time, he has flexed his way through it, dropped another platinum record, and kept his mythology alive. But this time is not like the other times. Because this time, Ross is not fighting a diss track. This time, Ross is fighting his own paperwork. And the moment he stepped into that VIP lounge yesterday and confronted Curtis face to face, he did the one thing his lawyers had been protecting him from for a decade. He gave Curtis Jackson a piece of physical evidence. And that brings us to the last piece of this puzzle. Late tonight, a verified Twitter account belonging to one of the most powerful producers in modern hip-hop, a name I am not going to say on camera because his people have already started sending cease and desist to blogs, posted a single cryptic message. 2 sentences. The first said, "Some paperwork is not meant to leave a lawyer's office." The second said, "Some people were warned." That was it. No hashtags. No tags. Just those 2 sentences. And within an hour, that post had been screenshotted and passed around every single hip-hop group chat on the internet. Because everybody in the industry knows this producer has worked with both men. Everybody in the industry knows this producer sits on more secrets than the FBI. And everybody is wondering the same thing I am wondering. Who was warned? What paperwork? And whose lawyer's office did that document originally come from? Now I want to hear from you guys, because this one is splitting the entire culture, and your voice matters on this one. Do you think Rick Ross was genuinely caught with a cooperation agreement of his own, and the corporate litigation story is just legal cleanup to save face? Or do you think Ross is holding 50 Cent's sealed 2015 bankruptcy files as leverage, and yesterday's brawl was really a fight for that leverage? What do you think is actually inside those pages? Bank accounts? Shell companies? Hidden ownership stakes in the Power franchise? Off-the-books deals from the Shreveport studio? Y'all let me know exactly what you think in the comments, because I read them all, and I already know this comment section is about to be a movie by itself. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, if you want to be the first person in your group chat to see the alleged audio recording from that lounge, if you want to see the leaked photos as soon as they are legally cleared, and if you want the full breakdown of the court filings the second they hit the docket, do me 3 quick favors right now. Smash that like button so YouTube pushes this out to more hip-hop fans who need to see it. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an emergency update on this story. And share this video with every single person in your group chat who thought this beef was over. Because trust me, this beef is not over. This beef just changed shape. And the next 48 hours are going to change everything. That's all I got for you tonight. Keep your eyes on this channel, and I'll talk to you very soon.